I need you to listen to me very carefully because this message is not random and this moment is not accidental. If you are here, if you pressed play, it is because something in your spirit is already awake. February 10, 11, and 12 are not just dates on a calendar, they are spiritual markers. And tonight I am speaking as someone who once stood on the other side of the spiritual realm, someone who understands how financial curses are planted, activated, and enforced, and how they are completely destroyed. I am not speaking theory, I am speaking memory. There was a time when I understood exactly how money could be blocked without touching a person's bank account. I knew how bloodlines were targeted. I knew how certain families stayed poor generation after generation. No matter how intelligent, hardworking, or prayerful they were, I knew how objects, words, vows, and timing were used to legally give darkness access to finances. And I also knew something else, something that terrified the kingdom of darkness when I left it. Every curse has an expiration date, but most people never reach it because they don't recognize the moment of release. February 10, 11, and 12 are not ordinary days. In the spirit realm, these are days when old financial contracts expire, when cycles end, and when what was spoken in secret loses its authority. That is why you have felt pressure lately. That is why things have felt heavy, delayed, confusing. That is why money has slipped through your hands. No matter how careful you've been, that is why opportunities almost worked but didn't. This was resistance, not failure. When I was deep in witchcraft, there were specific windows we watched for. Certain days carried weight. Certain seasons allowed reinforcement of poverty. Spirits and other seasons forced them to retreat. February has always been one of those dangerous months for darkness because what was planted at the start of the year can be uprooted before it matures. And right now, something is breaking. I remember the assignments that were sent out against families. I remember how poverty spirits were attached to surnames, not individuals. That is why some of you watching can trace lack back to grandparents, great grandparents, entire bloodlines that struggled no matter how hard they tried. That was not coincidence. That was design. But hear me clearly, design can be dismantled. Many of you were marked early in life, not because you were weak, but because you were dangerous. You carried the potential to break cycles, and that made you a target. So finances were attacked first because if you can keep someone tired, stressed, embarrassed, and surviving, they never rise into purpose. That was the strategy. But February 10, 11, and 12 are days when the strategy fails. These are days of exposure, and darkness hates exposure. I am speaking to people who have prayed and still struggled, people who tithed and still lacked, people who fasted, believed, trusted, and wondered quietly why nothing shifted. You were not ignored. You were delayed by resistance that is now losing its legal right. There are financial curses that were activated through words spoken over you when you were a child, through jealousy, through trauma, through rituals you never participated in but were affected by, through objects placed in homes, through covenants made before you were born. And hear this, those covenants are breaking. In witchcraft, timing is everything. And there are moments when even the strongest curse cannot survive because the authority that sustained it collapses. That is what is happening now. The spiritual climate is changing, and what once held power is becoming illegal. That is why you may feel unsettled right now, restless, emotional, even tired without explanation. This is not weakness. This is separation. This is what it feels like when something that has been attached to you for years is losing grip. Some of you have noticed strange patterns ending, debts suddenly closing, unexpected refunds, opportunities reappearing, or even the opposite, things falling apart quickly. Do not panic. When a curse breaks, it often manifests as disruption before restoration. Darkness flees messy. I need you to understand something very important. Financial curses do not always look like poverty. Sometimes they look like constant near breakthroughs, almost success, almost stability, almost abundance. That is how people stay trapped without realizing they are bound. But this window, February 10th, 11, and 12 cuts that pattern in the spirit realm. These are days when seals are broken, when agreements expire, when watchers lose jurisdiction, when what was hidden is exposed by light. That is why this message is reaching you now and not later. You were meant to hear this before these days pass. I am not telling you to fear. I am telling you to stand. Because when a curse breaks, it looks for a new host. But if you remain aligned, it cannot reattach. That is why awareness matters. That is why this message matters. There are people watching who will look back on this week and realize it marked the end of financial stagnation in their lives, not because money magically fell from the sky, but because the invisible barrier collapsed. And when the barrier collapses, flow returns. I am going to expose the exact ways financial curses were maintained after January, why some people felt blocked right at the start of this year, and what shifts during February 6 specifically that causes sudden reversals. Stay with me because what is breaking right now will not be rebuilt again. Now listen closely because this is where many people misunderstand what is happening right now. When January ended and February began, some of you expected relief immediately. You expected finances to suddenly improve, pressure to lift, doors to open. But instead, for many of you, the resistance increased, money felt tighter, delays became louder, confusion intensified, and you quietly wondered, if something is breaking, why does it feel harder? This is where I need to tell you the truth most people never hear. When a financial curse begins to lose authority, it does not leave quietly. In witchcraft, when a legal right is about to expire, the system attempts reinforcement. That is exactly what happened at the start of this year. January was not just a new beginning, it was a confrontation. Old assignments tried to reassert control before their window closed. That is why some of you felt attacked in ways that didn't make sense, unexpected expenses, sudden losses, strange arguments, emotional heaviness tied to money. That was not random. That was desperation. February 10 is critical because it marks a shift in spiritual jurisdiction. What was allowed to operate under extension can no longer do so. And when permission is revoked, enforcement collapses. That is why darkness pushes hardest right before it loses grip. I remember how we tracked these moments. I remember how fear spread when we knew a cycle was ending. Because once a curse expires, it cannot be renewed unless the person unknowingly agrees again. And many of you refused without even realizing it. You refused by surviving. You refused by praying when you didn't understand. You refused by not giving up. And that resistance mattered. There are people listening to me right now who were meant to give up in December. That was the plan. The exhaustion, the disappointment, the isolation, it was all meant to make you quit before February arrived. But you're still here. And because you're still here, the contract is void. This is why February 10 feels heavy for some and relieving for others. Depending on where you are spiritually, you may feel exposure, emotional release, or sudden clarity. Some of you will suddenly recognize patterns you never noticed before. You will see how money was slipping away, how decisions were subtly influenced, how fear controlled your financial choices. That awareness is not condemnation, it is freedom. Because curses thrive in ignorance, but they starve in light. There is something else I need to expose. Not all financial curses come from witchcraft rituals alone. Some are sustained by trauma, by survival mentality, by vows made in pain like I'll never have enough, or money always leaves me, or people like me don't prosper. Words spoken in emotion can become agreements. And February 10 is a day when those agreements are challenged. That is why emotions are surfacing. That is why memories are coming back. That is why some of you feel the urge to clean your home, remove objects, reorganize, let things go. This is not random behavior. This is instinctive deliverance. When a curse breaks, the body knows before the mind understands. Some of you are already seeing signs, emails, phone calls, ideas returning, connections resurfacing, or simply a strange peace where anxiety used to live. These are not coincidences. These are symptoms of release. But let me be clear, this is not the end of the process. It is the collapse of enforcement, which means restoration begins differently for everyone. Some will see immediate financial shifts. Others will experience new clarity, wisdom, and opportunities that lead to long-term abundance. Both are victories. The danger right now is discouragement, because when the enemy loses legal rights, the final tactic is intimidation, making you think nothing changed, making you think you missed it, making you think this message wasn't for you. That is a lie. If you are listening, you are included. February 11 is where stabilization begins. It is the day when broken systems stop trying to recover, when silence replaces interference, when clarity replaces confusion. This is when many of you will notice that the constant struggle in your mind around money begins to quiet. And that quiet is powerful, because when fear leaves, wisdom enters. I need you to understand that financial freedom is not just about income. It is about authority. When a curse breaks, you regain authority over decisions, timing, and direction. You stop leaking energy. You stop making survival-based choices. You begin to move with discernment instead of desperation. That shift changes everything. Some of you will feel called to do things differently after this week. You may walk away from certain habits, certain people, certain cycles. not because you are being punished, but because you are being repositioned. When witchcraft assignments fail, destiny accelerates, and that acceleration can feel uncomfortable at first. Now we arrive at what happens after February 11, and this is where everything becomes very real, because breaking a financial curse is one thing, but learning how to live without it is another. Many people don't realize that when something has controlled you for years, its absence can feel unfamiliar, silence can feel strange, stability can feel unnatural at first. But do not misinterpret peace as emptiness. This is where many people accidentally rebuild what was destroyed. I am saying this with urgency because once the enforcement ends, the responsibility shifts, not to strive, not to panic, but to remain aligned. In the spirit realm, when a curse is broken, it does not simply disappear. It loses permission, and without permission, it cannot return unless it is invited back through fear, agreement, or old patterns. That is why awareness matters so much right now. After February 12th, the atmosphere changes, the pressure lifts, the constant mental noise around money quiets. Some of you will notice you are thinking more clearly than you have in years. Ideas will come without panic attached. Decisions will feel calmer. This is not accidental. This is what it feels like when authority is restored to the rightful owner. And here is something most people never hear. When poverty leaves, it tries to leave confusion behind. If it cannot control your finances, it will try to control your perception, making you doubt the shift, making you question whether anything truly changed. That is why you must measure this season by peace, not by immediate numbers. Numbers follow alignment. There are two types of breakthroughs happening right now. Some of you will experience sudden reversals, unexpected income, debts erased, doors opening quickly. That happens when the curse was the only blockage. Others will step into progressive overflow, new skills, new strategies, new paths that create stability over time. That happens when identity is being rebuilt alongside provision. Both are equally powerful. What matters is that you do not rush this season. Witchcraft thrives in urgency and fear. Freedom thrives in patience and clarity. You no longer need to chase. You no longer need to prove. You no longer need to survive. You are allowed to build. Some of you have lived your entire life in reaction mode, responding to emergencies, fixing problems, covering gaps. After this week, many of those emergencies will stop appearing, and that can feel unsettling at first. But do not fill the silence with old habits. Rest is not laziness. Peace is not stagnation. Stability is not loss of ambition. It is foundation. I want to speak directly to those who feel a strange mixture of relief and grief right now. Grief for lost years, lost opportunities, lost time. That feeling is normal. But do not let grief turn into regret. Everything you survived taught you discernment. Everything you endured sharpened your wisdom. You are stepping into abundance with depth, not naivety. And that makes you dangerous to the enemy. This is why your breakthrough had to be delayed. Because if it came earlier, it would have destroyed you. You needed maturity to steward what is coming. You needed clarity to protect it. You needed healing to sustain it. And now you are ready. After February 12th, You may notice shifts in relationships. Some people will fall away naturally, others will reappear with different energy. This is not punishment. This is alignment. Financial freedom often requires relational boundaries. Not everyone can access the next version of you. Do not explain yourself. Do not apologize for growth. Do not shrink to keep others comfortable. You are not becoming selfish. You are becoming responsible. There is also something sacred happening in homes right now. Many of you will feel led to clean, reorganize, remove things, simplify. This is not about aesthetics. This is about spiritual order. When chaos leaves the finances, order enters the environment. Honor that instinct. I need to tell you something very important as I close this message. The reason this had to be released in parts is because your spirit needed time to catch up to what was happening. Deliverance is not just a moment, it is a process of recognition. You are not cursed because you are unworthy. You are targeted because you are valuable. And what was assigned to limit you has failed. February 10, 11, and 12 marked the end of an era you did not choose. But February 8 and beyond marks the beginning of one. You will build intentionally. You do not need to fear the future. You do not need to obsess over money. You do not need to replay old narratives. Those chapters are closed. What comes next will require wisdom, patience, and trust. But it will not require survival. And that is the greatest miracle of all. If you have felt something shift during this message, hold on to that peace, protect it, build from it, because what has been broken will not be rebuilt again. This is not hype. This is not emotion. This is exposure, and exposure always leads to freedom, and freedom once claimed never asks permission today.